Let's turn our attention now back to Australian politics. Our political editor, Andrew Clennell. The Clennell crystal ball to wrap up the program today, as we do every week. And Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister, heading north this week.
Yes, he's keeping up the travelling. He's set to travel to Brisbane on Tuesday and then Gladstone on Wednesday for a first regional meeting of the federal cabinet under the Albanese government. An interesting move, this, given how poorly Labor polled again in Queensland.
He's got talks with his colleagues then, and then talks with the state leaders later in the week.
Albanese will host the Premiers, almost COAG style, in Canberra on Thursday and Friday this week in his first National Cabinet meeting. So I guess we'll see the press conference involving all of them on Friday. No doubt the energy crisis and health funding will feature.
Big budget looming federally in October, sooner than that, with your guest earlier in the program, Matt Keane, in New South Wales.
Yeah, and I think we got a sense of a few things in there, like a childcare assistance package on top of the Albanese package. They obviously see that as a vote winner, the New South Wales Liberal Nationals, having seen it work at a federal level. A lot of focus on this New South Wales state budget. We'll start to see that this week with some announcements. It's ahead of what promises to be a tight election next March and perhaps another change of government. A real test here for Dominic Perrottet and Matt Keane. It looks like the windfall $30 billion from Mike Baird's electricity poles and wires transaction has run out. Despite this, there is still some speculation Keane will be producing a surplus in the forward estimates. Rare in these times, unless you're in Western Australia. The Perrottet plan is to go to the election with a forward-leaning agenda, something he thinks Scott Morrison did not do. After 12 years in office, and with his government in minority, it still shapes as a tough task for Dominic Perrottet to win another term, Kieran.
Andrew, we've got a number of government ministers on the international stage. It makes sense with a new government, they're back in office after a decade, that they go and have face-to-face meet and greets. We've seen Penny Wong, very active in our region. Richard Marles confirming earlier in the program that he's met with his Chinese counterpart and a possible more detailed set of talks later today. So maybe the start of the end of a diplomatic freeze that's been in place for a number of years. And the Trade Minister, you've got some mail on his plans as well. What's happening there?
Yeah, well, it's the first chats between Australian and Chinese ministers since the pandemic, so more than 2.5 years ago. And we've seen President Biden is still talking to President Xi, even if it's not that regular and even if there's immense tension there. So this is pretty significant, what Richard Marles has told you, and I expect the same with Trade Minister Don Farrell in Geneva. He's on his way to that WTO meeting where he is hopeful of a meet and greet as well with his Chinese counterparts. And Richard Marles, the first minister interaction, as I said, for 2 years. No doubt if there's further discussion, they'll talk about some of the incidents over the South China Sea. For Don Farrell's part, if he meets his Chinese counterpart, he'll be raising concerns about wine, beef and barley sanctions, Kieran.
Yeah, indeed. And while it's interesting, you mentioned Biden's talks with Xi, absolutely right. The US Defence Secretary Lloyd Austin had a 1-hour meeting with the Chinese Defence Minister yesterday. So it shows they're willing to sit down and have the dialogue, and it's a good thing to have dialogue, particularly when you've had a period of rocky relations. So we'll stay tuned on that. He's been introduced to his counterpart. And again, people might say, are they overreading this? But as you well know, Andrew, the Chinese will not have any engagement. If they don't want to be meeting people, they won't.
Yes, well, I think this is something to watch this week, definitely, when we talk about the crystal ball, is these Farrell and Marles interactions with the Chinese. Significant story, that one that Richard Marles first spoke about on the program this morning.
Indeed, Andrew Clennell, thank you.